Time for another story. This one was inspired by my son. It is a dark comedy, so be prepared. It is called The Trouble with My Wife, Chapter 1. I went to see my doctor last Tuesday as he left a message on my cell phone saying that he needed to see me as soon as I could make an appointment. Since I had Monday and Tuesday off from work, I always made my appointments on Tuesday. I walked up to the medical receptionist window and told her that I had an appointment with Dr. McBride. I showed her my insurance card and paid the $20 copay. She said, "Thank you. You may have a seat. One of the medical assistants will call for you when Dr. McBride is ready to see you." I went to a chair, sat down, and began rummaging through the magazines that were placed on the coffee table in front of me. I found the Reader's Digest and opened the laughter is the best medicine section. I always loved a good laugh. I was snickering when a medical assistant called James Johnson. I followed her to the scale. I still weighed 185 pounds, which wasn't terrible considering that I weighed 220 pounds just 2 years earlier. The medical assistant pointed to a room she wanted me to go into. I did, and sat down at the nearest chair to the desk. She took my vitals, then said as she stood and walked toward the door, "Dr. McBride will be in shortly." She then closed the door behind her, leaving me to my thoughts. Why would the doctor call me? I feel healthy and my vitals are good, I thought to myself. I picked up the Reader's Digest and began reading some of the other humorous stories. Again, I was snickering when Dr. McBride entered the room. "You may want to have a deep breath for what I have to report," Dr. McBride said in a sober tone. I did. "What's going on?" I asked. "We got your blood test back and found an anomaly," he said. He was on the computer looking at my file. "We found that you have aggressive lung cancer. I hate to be blunt, but I feel you need to know so you can put your life in order," he said. "What's the prognosis, doctor?" I asked. I was shaking with fear. "I would say a month on the outside, maybe 2 weeks," he responded. I didn't even know that I was sick. I know that I've been smoking for about 17 years. I've been coughing lately, but I feel healthy. Are you sure? I asked, not believing what I just heard. "Yes, Mr. Dr. McBride," he responded. I walked out of the clinic dumbfounded. I was only 58 years old. My dad would be pissed when he found out that he would outlive his son. No parent should outlive their child. It just isn't right. My mind started working overtime. I heard confession was good for the soul. I also hoped that deathbed repentance would help as well. I called my priest and asked him to meet me at the police station. I had something to get off my chest, and I needed both to be present. My priest said that he would be there. I figured that I had nothing to lose. I'd be dead within a month. What could they possibly do to me? I reasoned. The only depressing thought I had was, will my children forgive me? Chapter 2. My story starts nearly 17 years ago. I was in my early 40s, 42 I think. My wife Jennifer was a year younger. I woke up that late spring morning. I think it was a Tuesday, with my arm planted on her chest. She wasn't breathing. I got up and shook her. "Wake up," I cried. "Wake up!" Nothing. She just laid there, not breathing. I don't know how many times she told me not to put my arm on her chest. "I can't breathe when you do that," she had said. I just thought she didn't like to cuddle with her overweight husband. I weighed nearly 230 pounds at that time. I guess that kind of weight could eventually cause harm. Actually, it did. She laid in our bed dead. What was I going to do? I asked myself. Figure it out later, I answered. Right now you have to call her employer and tell him she's not doing very well, and can't get up, I heard my inner voice say. At least I wasn't lying. She wasn't doing well at all, and there was no way she was going to stand on her own. I made the call. The next thing I thought about was my 3 children. Jenny, who was 12 and in the 6th grade, Johnny, who was almost 9 in the 3rd grade, and Jesse, who was 7 and in the 2nd grade. What was I going to tell them? That their mother was dead? I don't think so, I thought to myself. Again, later, was the response. "Children, time to get up," I called. "I'm going to make breakfast. Your mother is totally dead." Exhausted, I corrected myself. Jenny was about to go into our room to check on my soon-to-be decomposing wife. "Don't wake your mother. She needs her sleep," I said in the nick of time. Jenny turned around and went into the bathroom instead. Good save, I said to myself. Once the children are off to school, I can figure things out, I told myself. I was happy that I didn't have to go to work that evening, but I needed to figure things out before my children came home at 3:30. It was 7:30 when they caught the bus. They were all going to the elementary school here in town. That gave me 8 hours. I thought of calling the police. In hindsight, that is what I should have done. But at the time, I couldn't bring myself to telling my children that their mother was dead, and that it was by my doing. If only I wouldn't have fallen asleep with my arm on her chest. All I could hope for was that she passed away quietly, that she didn't suffer. There has to be a way to make the children believe their mother was still alive, I told myself. But what do I do with her body? I can't just let her lie around and be lazy, I said. Then it came to me, probably because of the crime dramas that I watched, that with no body or evidence of a crime, I wouldn't be in a lot of trouble. I wasn't looking for a perfect murder, but only a way to spare my children of learning their mother was dead. I wanted to avoid the agony. I undressed my wife and carried her naked body into the garage. I laid her down on the cold cement floor. "I'm sorry, honey. I hope you're not too cold," I said apologetically. I took a strong rope and tossed one end over the beam. I then tied her feet and pulled her other end until her head was about 3 feet off the ground. I was glad that she cared about her body, as she weighed a light 115 pounds. It wasn't a strain to lift her body. In fact, it was quite easy. I tied the rope to secure her body, then got a 5-gallon bucket and put it under her head. I sliced her neck with her favorite kitchen knife. Nothing but the best for the love of my life. I let the sanguine blood flow into the bucket. I hoped that the 5-gallon bucket would be big enough, as I didn't want any blood spilled on the floor. No evidence, no crime. The blood began to flow less freely, then began to drip. Plop, splash, plop, splash, plop, splash. Hacksaw was used to cut off Jennifer's head. It came off quite easily, easier than I had thought. I held her head in my left hand and sat on the stool that I brought into the garage for this purpose. It reminded me of the scene where Hamlet is holding his skull, and I chuckled at the idea. I'm sorry that I I'm sorry that I did this to you, honey, I said to my wife's head, looking into her deep blue ocean eyes. But I can't let our children know that you're dead. Somehow I need them to believe that you're still alive. I'm working on that. I know that you think that I cheated on you, but I didn't. Almost did, and flirted with the idea. You're the only one I ever loved, I said. I kissed her lips and stood. I put Jennifer's head on the stool with an old towel under her head so blood wouldn't get into the stool. No blood, no evidence. I allowed her to watch me so I wouldn't be accused of hiding anything from her. I always tried to be truthful to my wife. I dumped the bucket of blood with added water to dilute the thickness onto her flower bed so she could be part of the beauty she had planted. She needed to be part of our family. With a couple of old towels laid out on the garage floor under her body, I began the work of cutting my wife's body into packageable pieces and wrapped them in butcher wrapper. As I cut off each piece of meat, I labeled each package leg, wing, breast, rump, and head, heart. Some of her was put through the meat grinder and labeled hamburger. I put the rat meat into the freezer for later use. As I said earlier, I wanted my wife to be part of our family. She would be part of each of us. I put the rest of her remains into the 5-gallon bucket, including her liver. I hate liver. I took it into the country where I dumped it. The animals would enjoy her as much as we would. Why should I be selfish, I thought. She loved hiking as well as loving us. Her spirit would be in that many places, or at least pieces of her would be. Time was running out. The children would be home in an hour. I needed to clean up any mess that I made. The rope was put back into its place, and the old towels were put in the laundry bin. The blood on them was little. I had something special in mind for Jennifer's head. I put in a large pot of water and put it on the stove to boil. The flesh would come off easily and would put her skull on the end table so that she could always be with me. I needed to have her so I could talk things through. I know she would have appreciated that. She always liked to listen to my thoughts and hear me read the stories I had written. I wanted her to know that although she was dead, she would be part of the family and would be aware of the decisions that were made. The children would be home in 5 minutes. I cut it close, too close. What was I going to tell the children? How was I going to keep their mother alive in their hearts? I asked myself in a near panic. Had spent so much time carving my wife's body that I hadn't focused on answering those questions. I had to think fast. 2 minutes. I came up with a plan of action as the children walked into the house. "How's Mom, Dad?" Jenny asked Jenny. "I've been thinking about her all day." "Me too, Daddy," piped in Jessie. "She woke up after you guys caught the bus and lost her head when she learned that I didn't allow you to say goodbye." I lied. "She received a phone call from Grandma asking if she would come home for a while. Grandpa is ill and needs your mother to help care for him." I continued lying. It hurt to lie to my children, but the alternative is much worse. It's okay to lie if it helps save the feelings of others. I took her to the airport and got home just before the bus dropped you off. "Your mother won't be home for another 3 weeks." I said it with a straight face. "That will give me time to come up with something good," I told myself as I took in a deep, calming breath. Chapter 3. Over the next few months, I gave excuses why Jennifer wasn't coming home. Time was running out, as were the excuses. I took up smoking about this time to calm my nerves, and now I'm told that it was going to kill me. How ironic. I never felt guilty for cutting up my wife or feeding her meat to my children. She tasted good. I always said she had good taste. I got rid of her body for the sake of the children, not to keep myself out of prison. I loved my wife. She meant everything to me. That's why I ate her. That's why I kept her skull on her end table in our bedroom. We had many deep conversations over the years, have been heated arguments, but never when the children were present. I digress. The excuses need to end once and for all. She wasn't ever coming back. I called the children to the dining table. That's where we always had our serious discussions. "Children," I said with a sad voice, "your mother isn't coming home." "What?" they cried in unison. "What do you mean she's not coming home?" "I lied to you when I said she was going to Grandma's. She ran off with an old friend of hers. I didn't want you to be hurt," I said, choking back the tears. The tears were real. I hadn't seen my wife since that day in the garage. Just her skull. Like my children, I would never see Jennifer again in this life or the next. Just keep this in your hearts. She's part of each of us. When the flowers go out in the spring, she will be part of them as well, I said soothingly. I love your mother and have forgiven her for leaving us. I would appreciate it if you would do the same, I continued. I will promise you this one thing. I will never look for a replacement for your mother. I never did, nor was ever tempted. I had my wife's skull to keep me company, and still have it. Over the years, the children learned to accept the knowledge that their mother would not come home. I reassured them that she was too embarrassed of her actions to face them, but they believed she was still alive, and that was what I was hoping for. Now they will learn the truth. My children are all grown up now. Jenny is married a man by the name of Josh. They have two young children, Jacob and Jamie. Johnny is living with his boyfriend Jeremy. Jessie, who is now 4, lives at home and is working on her master's thesis, Abnormal Psychology, the mind behind the man who eats man. I think they will be able to handle the knowledge that I accidentally killed their mother and fed her to them. Chapter 4. I finished my story with tears in my eyes. I still loved my wife. She was the only one I ever loved, and I miss her greatly. My priest and the captain looked stunned, unbelieving. I pulled out my wife's skull and asked them to do a DNA test to check out my story. But before I gave them her skull, I kissed her forehead as I had done every night before going to sleep and every morning when I awoke. A knock was heard on the captain's door. Enter, he said, and an officer opened the door. The officer said, "There's Dr. McBride here to see you, Mr. Johnson." The captain said, "Show him in." Dr. McBride came in, looked at me with a smile, and said, "I called your home and was told by your daughter Jessie that I would find you here. I have some good news to report. There was a mistake on the blood test. You do not have cancer. I hope that will make your day." He turned and walked out the door.